Clean it like riding, but I know that they ain't. Ride or die. I go hard in the paint, yeah, homie, I'm a saint. Ride or die.
That last part, like God's not ensuring that you're not a brain in a vat, because you could have had your whole life as a Christian or whatever, and everything is just as you believe. It's all good. And then somebody has just kidnapped you, like, 5 seconds ago or 5 minutes ago or whatever, or 5 minutes ago, they just implanted all of these beliefs and everything that you have.
Correct. Yeah,
Right.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't
And then
disagree with that.
right. So you could still believe in God, and it's not like your belief in God gets you out of being a brain in a vat, or saying, if that just because, if God is true, as in the way that you believe, it would not somehow bail you out of being a potential brain in a vat right now, because that's just saying that
Yeah,
somebody.
I don't disagree there. I think you guys keep saying that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I'm saying that we cannot. It's impossible for us philosophically to get out
Sure.
of this
Right.
problem. So we only are left with our backs are literally
I
against the wall.
disagree. I
Well, I mean,
disagree. Philosoph. Hold on, wait,
well,
wait.
hold on,
There's,
James. Let me just finish what I'm saying right quick, because
Yeah.
the other guy said there is two. So
Yeah.
what
and
I'm
I've only
saying
got
is,
like 6 minutes too, by the way,
okay, well, I
guys.
just wanted to say, according to the atheists, it's impossible for us to get out of this. Now, it may not be that it's impossible. I'm just going with what atheists say. I'm saying if that's the case, then the Christian has justification for saying, I have faith that God exists. I'm not concerned about being a brain in a vat, and just leave it at that. And the atheist just has no, they can't criticize that because they're in the
Yeah. I
same
guess. Yeah.
epistemic limitation. That's
Yeah.
that's
I
all
guess.
I'm saying.
Right. I guess, and I'm just saying, Matt, that those are separate things, because, like, I'm saying that having the faith in God thing, that's great. I'm just
Yeah,
saying,
I
I
mean,
don't see the
it is
tying.
separate. I'm just saying
I
there's
just don't.
Uh,
no
okay, I
defeater, but
gotta.
James might
Okay.
have a
There's
defeater. We
no
can go
there.
with James
No,
next.
no. There's a big misconception in what you guys are saying. So logical possibility is different than whether or not there's a philosophical argument against it. Jack believes that the brain in the vat question doesn't fit him. He takes kind of a Wittgenstein approach.
Previously on James is Tired.
Jack, maybe just like a 5 or 6 minute explanation for why you're not a brain in a vat.
Well, I'd actually have to get clear on, because I don't think that a hypothesis. It's not clear to me that a hypothesis that there couldn't be evidence for or against is a hypothesis at all.
So, are you saying that
So
it's a bad question that Tom's been asking and he's not clear?
Wait, why can't there be evidence for that, Jack?
Wait. Are you saying that it's a bad question, Jack, and Tom's been asking an unclear question for 2 weeks?
it seems likely.
Why can't there be evidence? Why
Okay,
can't there be
all right,
evidence for that, Jack?
John.
I didn't say
No,
there
that's
couldn't be
that's
evidence for it.
that's. Hey, wait, that was perfect.
Now on James is Tired.
And him and I had a conversation about that, referring to hinges on a door. I take some of that, but I also like G.E. Moore's common sense. So there is an approach to it. But the question is, should every logical possibility be taken and considered? The answer is no, because you would agree that it's possible, Andrew, and logically possible, that every night aliens kidnap you, anally probe you, and then put you back and wipe your memory. But does that mean that tonight you should go get steel underwear and consider this? The answer is no. And so the common sense approach says that sure, there are these logical questions, and some of them seem rather ridiculous. Until we have any kind of justification to put that forth as a scenario that could be real world possibility, or somebody's arguing for it, then we don't even need to consider it. And that
I
is
agree
the
with you.
Moore approach.
No, I agree with you, James, and actually, Matt and I both agree. We have no doubt that we're not brains in the vat. So I totally agree with you, and I like your picture, by the way. And if the aliens are abducting me and doing that, I hope they wipe more than just my mouth when they're dropping me off. But yeah, no, I really think that that's the case. That we could just say that we have no doubt. We have no doubts, or yeah, we have no doubts about being a brain in a vat. Like, we're not. We
Yeah,
know we
when you
we
say that though, Andrew, I
yeah.
don't even know what you mean by doing that, because a proposition that's devoid of any kind of information or justification just seems silly. I don't walk around online saying, I have no doubt that aliens could be probing me. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. That's why like this whole entire past week has been equivocation on the atheist part, where they're taking a logical possibility and then they're trying to say that conflating it with philosophical possibility and saying that there is no response to these, but there is. And then also they're conflating it to real life possibility metaphysically. And that's the other problem. That's why a Christian like me has been pushing back so hard on these guys, because the argument in general tries to get a theist to go to some kind of global skepticism. But the problem with global skepticism or hyper-skepticism is you've thrown away all your yardsticks. You can't measure anything. You can't know anything. You don't even know if you're talking right now. And so that's a wildly problematic for the skeptic.
Yeah, the only reason I'm interacting with it because I think it's an interesting philosophical question, and I'm just saying, like, yeah, I don't. And the other reason is like what Albedo says, the fact that there's been a lot of pushback on it, and I'm open to there being an argument that shows that hey, you can get out of it, like Zelini or you were saying, or that you were referring to G. Moore, which I did. I have looked into it a little bit, James, and I've been asking about it. The G. Moore reference that you made, or like his way of getting out of it.
He's basically. It's basically he's got two hands, and he's got two physical objects.
Right.
Now, there's something known as the closer principle, and it means that if you can have justification for one thing, you can have justification for other inferences. So if I start seeing all these physical objects that I can interact with, I'm justified in believing there are additional physical objects. Now, when you're looking at the non-physical objects like the brain and the vat, you would then have to have somebody building an argument for that, but nobody really wants to argue for a brain and a vat.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see how any of those things that what you just referred to could not be simulated. I still have a hard time with that. But my thing is to you is like when you say like what?
That's the critique, Andrew. But that's that what if you take away all the measuring sticks that you have to examine reality, then you're in that hyper skepticism, global skepticism. And then I don't even know if you could state you exist for certain.
Yeah, well,
and I just see that wildly problematic.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I think I can for certain say that I exist, but I can't for certain say that I'm not a brain in the vat. But my thing is I do believe, so I hear what you're saying, James. I mean, I mostly I hear what you're saying, and some of it I agree with it. But the thing is, I just don't understand. Like when you say like I don't see why it's important, why we walk around talking about it, and I don't talk about the aliens probing me and stuff like that. Well, the reason that, like I said, that this is something that's been brought up for a while with philosophers talk about it and stuff like that. And we're talking about certainty as well. Just like the idea of being certain of anything. What can you actually be certain of? And this whole idea, and I'm not sure what your position is, James, as to whether you think God certainly exists and Christ certainly rose from the dead. You couldn't be wrong about that. Do you hold that position?
Yeah, I don't believe that I could be wrong about Jesus Christ rising from the dead or God's existence. Those are two things that I affirm, but you can also affirm those based on priors and justification. I wouldn't then look at like someone would have to make a claim that Jesus didn't rise from the dead, and I would have to look at that evidence and see, and then you can do comparative. But right now I'm convinced by what I have on hand.
But you couldn't be wrong though, right? And I'm just saying, like, if you can't be wrong, right? If you are epistemically certain, like it is impossible for you to be wrong about Christ raising from the dead and about God existing. If that's the case, then where does faith play into what you believe? What does faith mean to you? Doesn't that mean just trusting? Why would you trust if you have certainty? I don't understand. I don't understand how those two coincide.
No, faith is a duality. Faith is in the things seen and the things unseen. So you can have trust in that heaven is the way God described it. That the resurrection is the way God described it. But I have faith, justification, evidence that points to the resurrection or points to Jesus Christ. So that's why faith is a duality. You can't mun faith and then make it like just completely unseen things, because that's not the proper use of the word. Now, when it comes to belief statements, you can't lie and then tell somebody that you don't believe what you believe. Like for me to pretend that I don't believe that God exists and I don't have that certainty, would be disingenuous in the conversation. The only way I can be honest is to tell you, yes, I believe God exists. I have no doubt right now. But you can also examine my life and say, okay, well, 5 years ago you were an atheist. Or sorry, 2 years ago you were an atheist. 5 years ago before that you were a theist. But that still is within my commitments that I'm looking at evidence. And should I become convinced of something else, that would be a bridge that I cross when I come to it. But that doesn't mean that right now I pretend like I don't believe God exists.
Yeah, but okay, so just real quick, just real quick. When you say that you have, and I know you got to go soon, but just if you can quickly, and I appreciate you being here, James, but when you say that you have, so if we just say faith is trust or assurance or confidence in, right? How do those terms, how do those line up with also saying you are certain? So how can you be certain that Christ rose from the dead, but also have faith simultaneously in the same exact event? How can you be certain epistemically? You cannot be wrong. But then you also have this trust that that event happened. How can you even have trust if you're certain about it? I don't see how you have both of those simultaneously.
Well, you redefined faith from how I was using it. So we're right now, we're not even using the same definition. So within your question, I wouldn't answer the question the way you framed it, because I believe that it's a duality and that I have faith in this sense and I have faith in that sense. But when it comes to epistemic certainty, and I'm looking at my view, I know my own mental state. Now, you know your own mental state. You might say, okay, I have this feeling that God exists, but you're not like certain on it. And in that case, you would have a different belief state. But beliefs are not a choice. But when I'm reporting to you what my mental state is, you can either take that as in I'm reporting an honest mental state, or James is lying and he has some doubt about God's existence. But I'm telling you that I have no doubt. So in this sense, I'm conveying to you the scenario, and I'm also conveying to you from the fact that beliefs are not a choice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when I say doubt, so we're talking about certainty. When I say certainty, well, just so we're using the same terms, when I say certainty, I'm saying epistemic certainty. I'm saying it's impossible for you to be wrong. It's impossible. It cannot be the case that you're wrong on God's existence or Christ rising from the dead. And if that's the case, if you'll accept that on those terms, like if you can, so if you believe that it's impossible for God not to exist, and it's impossible for Christ to have not been raised from the dead, when Jesus tells Thomas, he puts his hands in his hands, and he said, you see and now you believe, but more blessed are those who haven't seen and believe. This idea of faith in the Bible, at least biblically speaking, pistis, seems to cash out as confidence, as trust. So I'm just saying, like, I'm not sure what you mean by duality, but I'm saying if you accept the terms in the way that I'm using them, just so it's impossible for you to be wrong that Christ rose from the dead, and that you trust that Christ rose from the dead. Do you trust that Christ rose from the dead, and do you also think that it's impossible that he did not rise from the dead?
Yeah, because those are belief states. And let me address that faith definition again, because maybe I wasn't completely clear the first time. So when you look at the biblical definition, it says faith in the seen and faith in unseen. So seen implies evidence, something that you've examined. And then there's also the unseen. So heaven, the resurrection of me when I die. Those are things that I take on that faith and confidence, but that's built off of the seen, and that I've seen this that gave me the belief state that God exists. So when I'm reporting to you that I don't believe I could be wrong about God's existence, I'm stating a factual statement. Now you could say, well, how can he have that much confidence when, and you could say, you're not sure that God exists, Andrew, and that could be your position. I would find that problematic, because I don't know why, if you were not sure that God exists or God doesn't exist, why you would lean and take the proposition that Jesus is God. It seems like you would just want to fall into an agnostic standpoint. But if you have a true belief state that God doesn't exist, then you would express that. If you have a true belief state that God does exist, you would express that.
Yeah.
If you weren't convinced, you would just be agnostic, and you wouldn't pretend or
Sure.
Pretend's a bad word. You
No, I
wouldn't
know what you mean.
necessarily lean one
Yeah,
way or the other.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Well,
there's
so
a
yeah,
difference.
yeah.
There's a difference
Just
between someone being like I'm 100% certain that I am not wrong about God existing,
right,
and I am 100% certain that I could not be wrong that God exists. Those are two
right,
different things.
right.
Like you can be
Yeah,
fully convinced in your belief, but not fully convinced in the possibility of like your belief being wrong.
I agree. I think that's the distinction that needs to be made there, James. I think that's right. So I can have complete confidence in the sense that I have no doubt. I have zero doubts, right, about God existing. But that's not to say that I don't accept that there's a possibility that he doesn't exist. I'm accepting a possibility. So I don't see how that's problematic. And in fact, I think a lot of theologians slash philosophers these days accept that. I don't think that that's an, if you go to somebody like William Lane Craig or just go, whoever you want to take is on kind of the forefront. Um, they do accept the fact, or they accept the idea that they could be wrong, right,
I don't
about
I don't know how
God's
you
existence.
can I don't know how you can accept that if you believe you can't be wrong.
I don't believe that. I
So
don't
if
believe
I
that though. I don't believe that.
but I but
Okay, go ahead.
but based on my belief, and beliefs are not a choice, I don't believe that I can be wrong. Now we can look at the fact that I do have an epistemology that is evidence based. I'm an evidentialist when it comes to Christianity. I'm not a presuppositionalist. So I will follow the evidence, and maybe that could lead to a different belief state. But right now, I'm expressing to you that my current belief state is that I can't be wrong.
Yeah, but isn't that really just saying, like, aren't you just saying you have no doubt? Like, you're not saying it's impossible, are you? Are you saying it's like logically impossible?
Logical possibility comes cheap, as we talked about the UFOs and the aliens. But when it comes to what I believe now, I believe it's impossible for me to be wrong.
Okay, but you do think it's logically possible that God doesn't exist.
I would have to get into when we're looking at, like, because there has to be a necessary being. God is a necessary being. So I don't think that you could have a being and not a being. So if you take away God, then you don't have any being. And I think that there's an X and not X there that emerges.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear that kind of played out because, yeah,
Well,
if you're
because, for
saying,
example, there has to be a necessary existence. And one of the problems that I find with an infinite regress means that there has to be a being that has always existed. And then that being, knowing that an infinite regress is logically impossible, there was a causal relationship. And then why would that being cause anything? Well, then it seems like there would be a will. And so there's
yeah,
intelligence and there's other things.
yeah,
So I don't think that you can have a being and not a being.
yeah.
So
How
I
about the
would say
Christian
that.
God?
So I would say it would be impossible that God doesn't exist in that
That's
sense.
How
interesting. I
about
would agree with a lot of your argumentation there, James. I actually
how
liked a lot of what you said there.
how about the Christian
Go
God
ahead.
alone? Just say, is there a possibility the Christian God doesn't exist?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Rab.
Well, right now, given my belief state, no.
But
But if you want to look,
logically possible, is it logically possible?
i-
So still having a necessary
if
being, but it being logically possible that it's just not the Christian God, but there's still a necessary being.
given my priors and my belief state, I think that the Christian God is the only one that fits that necessary being, the one that I laid out in the beginning. And so in that particular case, I would have to say no because of all the ties to that. Now, if we could knock down some of those walls that I believe, or connecting rods, we'll use that term, that are connected to how I lay out being, then you could say, okay, if you knock out 3 pillars and I've only got like 1 pillar, then maybe I would lean the other way with you guys, but I can't change my belief state. Like, I couldn't choose to believe to be a rock right now.
Yeah,
Wait,
no, I,
so
I, I
James,
agree.
can I have one clarifying? Could it be the case that Christian God is real, but Jesus hasn't come yet? So everything is the same about the Christian God, just Jesus never actually showed up yet.
No, given the prophecies and what I've already accepted, no.
So, but again, it's logical possibility though, James,
Giving examples is not
not
Well,
necessarily
if
what you think is.
There's a
if
confusion
No, I
here
would say
between
that was a
properties
logical
of belief and
impossibility there,
like
because he would
properties
if,
of
contradict what
when.
Scripture actually says about him having
if
them.
but the thing though is because I've tied my belief, and I believe I can connect the Christian God as being the only one that can fit that being and the necessary being, and I believe that it's logically impossible for God to exist in other or to not exist in other possible worlds. It means that I would directly still tie Jesus to that. So you would have to knock down several of my other commitments before I would say Jesus is potentially not God, or it's possible that he isn't God.
Yeah. Well, I think you said some really good stuff, James. Actually.
I've been
Um,
doing a lot of reading, some compiling other things.
sure.
Some of what I gave you was Craig. Some was more. Some was I think Wittgenstein. Some was what's the I can't think of his name at the I just put it down. One of the church fathers who did a lot on this particular subject. But it's good to think about these things. I'm just saying that logical possibility comes cheap, and not every logical possibility can be metaphysically actualized. And so you
Sure.
should really consider what logical possibilities you waste your time on. So if no one, for example, is arguing for a brain in the vat, you see no justification to believe you're a brain in a vat, then why are you spending more time on that and not on the aliens probing you? Like, it seems like both of those propositions that are devoid of any data seem equal.
Yeah. No, and I think again, it's probably just because that has been kind of the centerpiece, at least, that people have used to kind of talk about certainty, or and just kind of come up with these different scenarios. But that's been like a main one, right? Really, that people have talked about. And I don't have any kind of, I mean, myself personally, I don't have any kind of affection towards it. That's like weird, but it's just that I noticed that a lot of people on the theist side in particular have given pushback to it. And to me, that just kind of ties into the certainty that's being displayed by particularly a lot of reform folk. And to me, I don't, I mean, I'm not liberal, but I don't hold these dogmatic positions about existence or about Christ rising from the dead, because I don't think that I can. And so, but that's not to say that I doubt it. I'm just saying that it's the logical possibility. And so all I'm saying is if there are reform folk on here that say it's not even logically possible, I want to give pushback to that. So that's what interests me, because I think that that is just not, or anybody, not necessarily just reform folk, but that's just typically where I hear the pushback from. And it just doesn't make sense to me why you would just not grant, yes, it's logically possible. Does that mean that we think it's true? No. I mean, like I said, I would be willing to die for what I believe in. But it doesn't mean that it's logically impossible that God doesn't exist or that Christ didn't raise from the dead. That's my only point and my only stake in it, James, just so you understand
Yeah,
where
but
I'm coming from.
I appreciate you guys letting me jump in. I gotta go, but I see Solly's pretty mad at me in the chat. I thought we were on good terms, but he seems to hate me now. I'll have to ask him why he switched his position, because we had really good conversations like several times, and then now it's like he's got a bug up his butt. But thank you for letting me talk.
I'd like to
Yeah, no,
say
it's
that
good, James.
James said he had 6 minutes 20 minutes ago.
Well, I think I remember one time specifically when I called the Atheist Experience show, and we were talking about faith, and Matt Dillahunty said, I don't need faith, and frankly, you don't either." And I remember kind of conversations after that about what faith was on Facebook and things like that. I remember um, atheists mocking Christians, particularly for appealing to faith. Like when a Christian is asked a question, well, I have faith in God, I trust God, I believe Him, so I'm not concerned about this and this, and they would always say that was a cop out. And even Christians, intellectually snob Christians, would do the same thing, saying, "Oh, these Christians that appeal to faith, that's just a cop out." But what this thought experiment got me to realize is actually how actually intellectually honest everyone is if they just acknowledge that to begin with. But the ones that don't want to acknowledge that, whether it's atheist or whether it's Christian or whatever, are actually the ones who seem to be more ignorant of the problem than maybe the Christian who was actually appealing to it. Now, maybe those Christians hadn't really thought all this through either. They were just appealing to that because maybe they just didn't have the answer. But when it boils down to it, that's actually what it boils down to, is our epistemic, our knowledge, our ability to know things, first and foremost starts out with a faith or a belief in something. And the Christian, it's just God. The atheist, it's man. And according to Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, if your faith is in man, that's problematic.
Well, James is tired obviously doesn't have that kind of an interpretation, because his response to the brain in the vat scenario is not just to say, well, I have faith, I'm not a brain in the vat, but to appeal to some philosophical arguments. Like, he doesn't really do a good job of expanding what Moore and Wittgenstein said about it, but like at least he's appealing to those arguments and kind of understands them. Like,
I go hard in the paint, yeah, homie, I'm a saint. Ride or die.